All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is a pilot of Aram Sergey show where we will be talking about product. And the first episode is about product discovery. So let's start with that. Let's talk about product discovery. And the first one, and Aram, question to you is: what is the product discovery on a high level?
Yeah, sure. Good first question. So, product discovery could be, many things, but really the goal is to get alignment with you and whoever your agency partner is. It's to go through a series of tests to reduce risk through experimentation and by, ideally speaking to the customers. And then ultimately, the end of discovery should be a conclusion of your future scope that you're going to be working on, where you have kind of validated what it is that you want to do, and you have a game plan on how you're actually going to go do it. I think the part that is frequently missed is the importance of being able to speak and validate your business idea or whatever your product idea is with the actual people who are going to be using it in the discovery phase.
Right. And who is normally, when we look at the discovery phase, like who is normally involved in that process?
Yeah, so typically on our end, there's always a product manager involved who's typically running the show. There's ideally a UX designer part of the process as well, thinking about things from like a user research and user experience standpoint. And then there's a developer who is more of an oversight capacity in terms of seeing the learnings that are coming out and trying to think about some of the feasibility of what would need to be done after discovery, so that there's always somebody kind of like, validating or invalidating certain kind of hypotheses in terms of like the possibility of achieving them. And that typically also helps them when they get into the delivery side of things, so that they have the knowledge, they know what they did, they know what they tested, and they're kind of set up for success. On the client side, there's the business stakeholders typically involved. So ideally, that's the product owner who's involved on the client side. The product owner is the one who really brings the business requirements or like to us in terms of like, here's the problem, here's what we need to figure out. And they kind of give us that initial kind of like high level understanding of what we need to go and figure out. Sometimes on the client side, it could include their own designers. It could include, people from different aspects of the business who we would be solving the problem for, that we have access to do workshops with them, to interview them, to figure out like what's like a day in the life of them, or even ideally when speaking to the customers, what's like the main problem for the customers that we're trying to solve.
Right. And how long, if you were to, for example, take an average client that we work with at CrowdLunker, like how normally long does the discovery process take? But maybe you can give an example because it's so contextual.
Yeah, so discoveries can take various shapes and forms. On average, they take about 4 to 6 weeks. In situations when they could take less time, like 2 to 3 weeks, is dependent on the level of preparation that the client has put to date around that idea. So what I mean by that is if they already know what the problem statement is, if they've already gone and done their own competitor and market research, if they've studied like the problem with the customers, spoke to them, validated the hypothesis that they had, and maybe already have wireframes done, then for us to come in at that time, we're basically just getting acquainted with what they've done, doing our own audit assessment of their results, and seeing if it was done correctly or if there's any gaps. So, I mean, in that situation, it could take 2 weeks. All in, because the client has already gone and done a large part of the lift for us, which is obviously speaking to the clients and making sure that what they want to build is the right thing to build. So the problem statement is obviously the first step in any kind of discovery. Then there's research, and then solution like conceptualization, and then solution validation is typically the last stage of any discovery. So the ones that take longer, like 6 weeks, are in situations where there's basically nothing, where a client comes to us and says, I have this idea and I think it's a problem. And we think that if we do this and we speak to these people, then we can, figure out what we need to do. All right. So it's like, cool. Lots of ifs and buts and assumptions there. So in those situations, we kind of go through it like A to Z. We really kind of figure out, okay, who's the customer? Is it the right customer? How do we find them? Where are they? How do we speak to them? What should we ask them? What are we looking to get out of it? What does success look like? And then we're trying to look at everything also from the perspective later down the road when we're doing solution validation, which is like, are we building the right thing? Have we presented maybe like a concept or prototype to them that, they went through with us, where it kind of like confirms what we're trying to create? Are they going to maybe give us some sort of like commitment to use the product and be like evangelists for it through the co-creation process? And that's really important. I think discovery is all about co-creation with your target audience, if that's possible, because then you're basically getting a whole group of early users who are building the product with you based on their own kind of pain points that you're trying to help them solve.
Right. What do you think that companies who are doing the discovery process, need to think more about? Maybe they're not doing at the moment, or maybe they need to do better job of, in general, to have a more effective discovery process.
Yeah. So some things that typically happen is in certain projects we worked on, clients came to us already with like a design that they've created. And we're like, how did you come up with this design? We're like, well, I thought this was the best way to kind of make my solution work. And so, the red flags that we go off there is like, normally, I want to say maybe between 8 to 9% of the time, every product idea that you already have has already been done. And so why try to go and reinvent the wheel as well when you could go and study the competitors? You could look at the market. You could do a teardown of like user flows of existing competitor solutions to see, well, how did they do it? What are the things that I missed? There's like a lot of writing on the wall in a lot of cases which people just don't do. The biggest one is discovery. In many ways is supposed to validate something. It's either you're trying to validate your idea, you're trying to validate access to those users, like where do I find them, how much is going to cost for me to acquire them. Or if it's a very technical product, let's do a proof of concept. And so, and a lot of companies just don't do any of those things. They don't go and try to figure out how to reach those customers and actually put up a landing page, run some ads to it, see what the cost acquisition is going to look like. What are the most feasible ad platforms or social platforms in order to have a sustainable potential for user growth. If it's a very technical product, like a lot of them just write out all these requirements and they know, these data sources exist. I know because I looked at the API docs and it's there. It's a very different reality when you actually go and do a proof of concept about pulling that data, analyzing it, and seeing if there's anything like usable in those findings, because it would be a lot more expensive and painful for you to come to that realization when you're already in development. So they're just some examples. There's a bunch.
What do you think are the top 3 questions that clients always ask you about discovery that come up over and over again?
Yeah. How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? What's the value for me?
Oh, these are pretty standard. I expected something more sophisticated, but maybe I shouldn't.
No,
have.
I mean, it's sometimes people just don't appreciate the importance of discovery. And unfortunately, a lot of them brush it off. And then, we're working on something which we're not totally set on is the right approach, because the client already did a bunch of research, and sometimes they like to kind of be firm and say, no, this is like what I believe. So it's like, okay. But the problem is that those mistakes accelerate exponentially when you're going through then the design and development and launch phases. Like we worked with one client, they spent $600,000, not with us only, but in total building out a product. Spent a year building it, launched it. We helped them acquire all the users early on during our kind of like discovery phase, who signed up through like landing pages, and we got like maybe 1,500 or 2,000 signups. But then by the time the product launched, it was like 10 months later, and they never kept in contact with those people who initially expressed interest. And they built something not speaking to their customers once. And so when they actually launched the big reveal, it was crickets. Everybody's like, who are you again? What did I sign up for? Oh yeah, what does this product do? And then it's like they realize that, well, that's not what I thought it is. So
Oh yeah.
big lesson there is like when you're building out any product, if you're a startup founder or even an enterprise, having that very close contact with your paying customers is like so important, because otherwise you're just building a product for one user, which is you.
Probably not a good idea. We just spoke with a head of product at Typeform, Kabir, from who is in San Francisco, and he is on the partnership side. So he gave this interesting perspective, which I think we should talk more about on our podcast, is the importance of communities, the increasing importance of communities in the context of product development. That will be more and more and more important, and the requirements or the features that the product will have will be not only driven by the user, but they will be also dramatically, a lot of them will be driven by what the community actually wants.
Yeah, it's huge. I think, what can I say here? I think communities are something that are irreplaceable, or they're very hard to replicate. So what I mean by this is when building out a product or any kind of business, the more kind of like engagement you have with your users at the very beginning all the way through to launch and then post-launch via these communities is something that a competitor cannot go and replicate. That becomes in many ways your IP, because it's very hard to go and win a customer and keep them on your product for a certain amount of time. There's so much churn in SaaS, and trying to keep them engaged and coming back all the time is very difficult. So communities are a great way to get these like-minded people who share a common problem, discussing things within a private environment, and then you coming in as that listener and probing questions here or there, because you're basically getting like real-time intelligence, or the richest type of data you could possibly get if your community...
Closest loop feedback.
Yeah, the closest feedback loop you could ever have. And it's like free in a way, right? You're not paying for any ads. You've just you're nurturing and generating a user base for your product, which is similar in terms of mindset and the problems that they're facing. So anytime you want to do any type of survey or feature poll test or whatever, you have that audience right in your line of sights. So that's where I think a lot of companies are really starting to look at. There's a lot of growth in Discord and using that as like a solution, Slack as well. But I think the companies that successfully have a thriving community are the ones that are going to be successful, because they, in my opinion, care about what their customers want the most.
Now, I'm going to ask a question. Since we are a product agency, I want to start with a question of when people should not go with the product agency, product studio. When does it not make sense?
Yeah, good question. When does it not?
And maybe
make
it
sense?
is in the context, Aram, in the context of a discovery.
Yeah. So I think I think working with an agency, you have to realize that there's a cost involved. And the other thing to keep in mind is that cost potentially to do discovery is and always will be cheaper than you trying to go and hire a group of specialists in that role. So like if you were to try and go and create your own team and you bring on a product manager, a designer, a marketer, and a developer, if you have the money to front that or you're giving up a lot of equity, that's a different matter, because that in long term is just going to cost you a lot more down the road. But the importance of a discovery, I think, is key. So like either you work on it yourself, which is what I like to recommend if you have that capability or you have that knowledge to be able to go and do some of these things yourself, like go and find the customers, go speak to your customers, do customer development, interview them, understand, what their pain points, what are they willing to pay for. That requires a bit of grit, perseverance, sales mentality, and a little bit of understanding of product as well. If you could go do that, great, because then when you come to us, you're going to be a lot more prepared. You would have had a lot more of those questions that we would ask you done, and then we could go and more focus on the delivery side of actually getting this to market. When you shouldn't come to us is when you really don't know, what you want to do, because it's just going to cost you a lot of money. You're going to be potentially burning, because then it's really on us then to do that job for you, which is possible in certain situations if you have that runway and maybe you're like a serial entrepreneur and you've done this a few times and you're like, okay, I don't know exactly what it is, but let me hire this company, they'll do the discovery for me, and I'll learn through that process what I should be focusing on, what I should go and build. Not that many type of people like that, to be honest, that we've worked with, maybe like 2.
So reverse all of what you said, and that is these are the reasons why when you should come to us.
Yeah, I mean, you should come to us when you at least have an understanding. You've done a little bit of validation. You have like maybe an idea in your head that you've maybe spoken to a few people about that we could go and explore further, so that there's at least something for us to cling on to early on. Otherwise, we just might be spinning a few cycles, early on, which is normal for a lot of people that we work with until we kind of get our footing and understand what we're doing. But for a lot of people who come to me, they might be first-time founders and they just they're asking us to do these type of things when it should be really on them as a founder to go and do these things first. And then find a partner, I would say, when there's a bit more footing in place in terms of what they want to achieve. And they have the ability to bankroll it as well. Because it's not cheap, it's not really, it's not super expensive to work with us, but at the same time, you need to have some sort of budget in mind that you're willing to commit to, and then some sort of a runway that you could plan out that we could be working with you on.
Now, short blitz-style questions, Aram, to finish off our first episode, and 1-line, 2-line answers. Let's see what you're going to say.
All right.
Some of them are product, some of them are not product. Advice to a 30-year-old self, what would you say?
I'm only 5 years off of that, so if I was to go 5 years back, I'd probably want to pick up a bit more tradecraft and skill sets around around technology, like in terms of like programming, being able to be, fluent in like at least the basics, so that I could have a better ability to grasp certain things personally, and not always be reliant on others in order to see like the rationales being made. That's one, I would say. I would say the other one is probably
That's good. But we'll come back to it. That's actually that's even too long. The whole purpose is making it short. What might you do to accomplish your 10-year-old goal in the next 6 months if you had a gun against your head?
My 10-year goal? Well,
yes.
Okay. Simply, I'm 10 years into the company already. I've tried a few acquisitions and exits for the company, didn't work. My 10-year goal now would be to successfully raise like a microfund and do our own lab projects, where we're building our own products again, as a way to diversify just our professional service business.
What product people should start doing tomorrow to ship better stuff?
Always asking the question of, is what I'm building the right thing? Why am I doing things the way I am? And ultimately just having a very frequent feedback loop with your customer base, like on a bi-weekly basis.
At what point it makes sense to throw money at the product problem?
When you've hit product market fit and you need to scale. So like ideally, you found the problem, you validated it, you have some growth, you know what you need to do in order for it to succeed. It just comes down to scaling. And with scaling, you just need more money in order to kind of hit your goals faster. Because sometimes it's time boxed, or you only have a certain amount of time to achieve that real kind of like growth potential in your business. So money is always a thing that could go and help you solve that.
There you go. Guys, this is the first episode. We are at 25 minutes, and hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will do it again.